Today, on Be Something Wonderful, wow, conditions really are conditions, but I am. I let go and it manifested. I am your host, Tom Kearin, and this is the Be Something Wonderful studio of higher consciousness, where we help you level up and become the best version of yourself. Creators, welcome back. Massive video today, this morning. And I had a session last night. It was a follow-up from a client that I had met with who at the time was trying to sell his house, was imagining it selling. And so at the time we had talked, I want to really kind of go over what was going on, because now the house is sold. Now it's really in closing for sure. What changed though? Let's talk about some of the things that went on. Well, first of all, we moved him from trying to sell your house to it's sold. Okay, so he's no longer, at first he was imagining it selling, and he went to imagining that it's sold. But yet still, even with that, it was closing, and then a buyer didn't qualify after all, at the last minute. Then another buyer dropped out at the last minute. The house was virtually sold, right? And then there was a lowball offer. And then his realtor friend is telling him, it's been on the market for a while, you need to be realistic. He's seeing all these conditions that are telling him that it's not sold, right? That it's not happening, right? And so even as he was imagining that it's sold, and here's what happened. It did sell. It's now closing for real. And he said, wow, conditions really are conditions, but I am. What changed? Well, this is such a big insight he had. He goes, yeah, Tom, I did move to, I'm imagining it's sold. But what became clear to me, hear this, so big. He goes, I just created another condition. In other words, that I have to imagine that it's sold for it to sell. Instead of imagining that it's sold as reality, he was imagining that he's creating that reality of it sold, and that's a condition of it. He created another condition that kept it from selling, that it got close, but it didn't sell. Do you hear it? This is a distinction. So he's imagining it's sold, but he's believing that's a condition to the sale, right? That it won't sell unless he imagines it. Instead, he moved to, I'm imagining as reality. In other words, it's reality because I assumed it. In other words, what did he do? He went to the absolute assumption that it sold first. He went to the reality, the assumption, the declaration, the announcement, as I am, as you would from that I am power, that it's sold. And then he created the imaginal scene of seeing it sold, right? Versus before, he was imagining it sold as a condition of creating that reality or that assumption that it's sold. It sounds, guys, this is big, his insight here, because this is what moved him, because all of us have these times when we believe we're affirming and we believe we're imagining, but we're not seeing the results. Something happens, right? We see some condition that shows us differently. So he went to the absolute assumption, this idea that conditions are conditions, but I am. I'm going to declare it and assume it, and then I'm going to imagine. I'm going to create a magical act of seeing it sold, and then it's sold. Wow. That's powerful. I want to say that again. He said, it's closing. This time it's different. He goes, and essentially, he said he got out of the middle and stayed in the knowing that it's done. Right? Because even here, remember, your mind, we can bang out manifestations by going into our mind and mentally thinking better feeling thoughts, mentally viewing it and seeing it. We're going to have manifestations. We're going to have things we want and manifest things we don't want according to our inner state. But he transcended all of that, went to the absolute knowing and assumption first, and then went back to the middle and imagined. He let go of the middle and said, okay, I'm going to imagine it from my I am. I'm going to imagine it from that higher perspective, from that higher assumption that it's done, and stay in that knowing no matter what. no matter what the conditions are showing me. I want to show this today because this is such a big insight. This really gets to what the only truth is. I am is the only truth. Everything else is limited, conditional, relative, and temporal. Even the idea of going in the middle and mentally imagining your wish fulfilled, it's still temporal, right? It's still using the mind to create the form that what you want. But as you do it from that higher perspective, from the divine imagining, from knowing that I am is the only reality, as you declare it first as the only reality and then imagine it from that higher perspective, it must be that reality in that moment. You're not manifesting anything, you are that reality. It has to show you that. So big. Remember, it's self-evident, it's absolute, it's above and beyond all opposites. It's first cause, it's source. There's nothing before or after. It either exists, is, here and now, or it doesn't exist at all. This is what he really got at, right? That either that sale, that house is sold here and now, or it's not sold at all, right? And he was imagining from that perspective, as opposed to thinking that he was imagining it, trying to make that house sell, or trying to make something happen. Right? Trying to create a reality. He moved to the reality where it was already done and then received the image, saw the image within. That's big today. So before Abraham, I am. There is no I am not. It's not possible. Notness doesn't exist. The house not selling is not a reality. Right? It can be it's not the actual reality. What he wants, that assumption that it's sold exists. That's his reality. Not being able to sell it is what he was creating, right? That notness doesn't exist, only what you declare. There's no opposite to the present moment. This is really what happened. He got back into that present moment, that I amness, right? There's no resistance. There's nothing to fix. There's only pure awareness of being. Do you hear it? It's all power. It's all knowing, and it's here and now. Messing around is in the middle, I wanted to say here. Messing around in the middle can only give you an experience of something less than all that you are. So you can mess around the middle. You can condition that I amness, right? But it can only give you something less than all that you are. This was really his aha moment. Right? That sure, he's imagining it sold, but know that whatever he wants is already reality. He went up to the higher knowing that, yeah, he's conditioning it, but only from that higher perspective of I am. Right? So not trying to make something happen, lighting up what already happens, what already is a truth. Right? You can only, messing around the middle, you can only experience something less than all you are. So you are always left with wanting, desiring more. Do you hear it? That's why when we create anything, we always want something different. We always want something more. Because no matter what you create from the middle, from the mind, right? Not from that all-knowingness of God, not from that all-beingness of the divine, but in the middle of mind, of your mind, as you condition that I am, you're always going to be left with more, wanting more. Because you're always conditioning that I am into something less, whatever that is. Nothing wrong with that, but do it with that knowing that you are everything. And that you're simply narrowing that perception to see what you want to experience now. That's big. So remember, conditions are conditions, but I am. This is what he said. You are invoking the power and knowing and wisdom of all time when you do that. Right before Abraham, before the messy middle, before the mind, before thoughts, before feelings, before beliefs and conditions of any kind, there's I am. Do you see it? Before all of that stuff that goes on in the middle, there's just I am. There's I am, there's the middle, and there's you. The 3D worldview, the physical experience, right? The 3D worldview that knows the higher reality. This is Jesus of Scripture, right? That's the 3D Jesus. He knew the higher reality. He was one with it. He skipped the middle. Jesus never got tangled up in the middle, right? That's a 3D world personality. You try to will things. You try to will that sale. You're imagining it as he was. But he was imagining it from the standpoint that that's another condition to make it happen. They got to imagine to make it happen. It already happened. And so he went to the assumption that it's already there, and then imagined it from that higher assumption to resonate with it, to correspond with it, to be it in 3D reality. That's big. So you can knock out manifestations and demonstrations working up from or imagining and affirming from or in the middle. We create from there all the time. We create things we want, we create things we don't want from that middle, right? But conditions are conditions, thoughts are thoughts, feelings are feelings, assumptions are assumptions, beliefs are beliefs, but I am totally unaffected, totally unstained by any of that. So the greatest assumption is just I am. And then decide from that knowing what you want, right? Fear is fear, doubt is doubt, but I am. This is really such a great session we had because he was really driving a lot of this. He really had a great awakening there, a great epiphany, a great aha moment, right? The mind is the mind, the middle is the middle, but I am, right? Personal will is personal will, but I am. Yeah, you can make things happen. You can even imagine things with the mind from the middle, imagining that scene, right? From that 4D, from that mental plane. But it's the 5D, it's the spiritual plane that's source of all of it. Why not go directly there and assume it? Then imagine it any way you want. It's done, right? Wow, that's powerful. So stop responding, reacting, and answering to the middle and take your cue from above. This is what he did, right? Then respond with the absolute authority and conviction of I am, right? Don't respond to react, answering to the middle. Instead, decide what you want, go to that assumption, and then respond with the absolute authority and conviction. In other words, imagine from the absolute authority and conviction of I am. Imagine it's done from that absolute conviction. That's what he did, right? Remember Pontius Pilate to Jesus. He asked Jesus, where are you from? Right? Because the crowd was, saying that he's the Son of God, right? But Jesus gave him no answer. In other words, Jesus doesn't answer to 3D conditions. Your I am doesn't answer to those temporary conditions or even answer to the mind. The temporary assumptions, the temporary thoughts, or even the temporary imaginings of the mind. The I am's above all of it, right? That Pilate represents that personal will. It represents the middle. It represents those temporary conditions, right? And then when the crowd was saying, crucify him, he's saying he's the Son of God, right? And then it was said that Pilate got even more fearful, right? But Pilate said to the crowd, the mob, take him and crucify him, for I find no fault in him. Your 3D mind, your I am, that lower mind, it can't find any fault in I am, but it creates it. It creates the fear and doubt. It gets scared. It gets frightened, right? As you're imagining your wish fulfilled, you start doubting it. What am I doing? It's not going to happen. But fear and doubt are influenced by the temporary conditions. And that takes over. Do you see it? You start looking at conditions and it starts taking over, right? Just like here. Pilate said, I find no fault in him. But what did he do? He gave Jesus up for crucifixion anyway. He caved into the fear or the mob, or the fear and the doubts of the mob, right? The mob of fleeting, uncontrollable thoughts, feelings, beliefs, fears, and doubts. He gave up to that because he thought, if I don't give Jesus up here, the mob is going to come after us, or there's going to be chaos here, right? So he caved in, even though he found no fault. This is you. You know you can imagine your wish. You know it's all yours. But yet you still let that fear and those conditions affect you. So, therefore, it said, therefore, when Pilate heard this statement, this is the statement of the mob saying that he says he's the Son of God. He was even more afraid. Because now even Pontius Pilate's wondering, who is this guy? Right? And your personal will and efforts are no match for I am. right? They're no match for I am. Who and what you really are is no match. That awareness is no match for those 3D conditions. It's no match for fear and doubt. It's no match for those things that you're believing in. It's no match for the messy middle or even the mind. I am's above it all, above the mental plane. It's no match for the mental plane. The mental plane is no match for I am. It's no match for the physical plane. I am doesn't recognize any authority in the 3D personality, the will, or the temporary 3D conditions, or even the mental plane. It has no authority over I am. The only inner authority and truth of being is I am. Right? So we can create from that mental plane. We do all the time. But even that has no authority over who you really are. That's what this whole story in Scripture is about. Temporary feelings of conviction. So I try to imagine and affirm from a place of lack, doubt, and fear. And so you create these temporary feelings of conviction. You imagine it's done, yet then you look out and you're feeling good for a moment, a day or two, and you're feeling like you're in wish fulfilled and you're in fulfillment, and then you look out and see that it hasn't happened yet and you're in doubt and fear. Do you see it? That from that mind, you could imagine that. You could even knock out a manifestation or two while you're doing that. But then you start feeling lack again. You're getting the middle is having its way with you, right? Then you question, why hasn't it manifested? Or why it manifested, then he's hot and cold, or she's hot and cold, or the money comes and then I lose it again, right? That's why why haven't things changed? Because you haven't moved to that higher knowing. Like my client did. He was imagining it was sold, but he was imagining it as a condition. That it will only sell if I imagine it's sold, instead of being that reality. Standing in that I amness, still in that absolute conviction that I am reality, and then imagining from there. Right? Divine imagining, higher imagining. Wow, that's powerful. So, Pilate to Jesus, are you not speak? So, Jesus doesn't answer him. Pilate asks him, where are you from? Jesus doesn't answer. Your I am has nothing to do with it. Doesn't answer to those lower conditions, doesn't answer to your personal will of wanting to make things happen. You're not going to persuade it. You're not going to move it. It has no power over it, right? And then Pilate says, remember, Pilate as your personal will, as those temporary thoughts and feelings, as the mental plane even, right? The temporary mental plane. What? You're not speaking to me? Do you not know that I have the power to crucify you and the power to release you? Well, yes, that mental plane of your thoughts, feelings, and assumptions. That does have the power to crucify you or release you. Not ultimate power, though. It can create temporary conditions of heaven or hell, right? Or things that you want to manifest and things that you didn't want to manifest. It can create all of that. But all that's temporary, and none of that is your ultimate power. The messy middle of the mind and conditions, changing forms, has relative power to allow you to experience ultimate reality as heaven or hell, as conditions that you want to manifest, as conditions you didn't want to manifest. But that power is puny and fleeting relative to the absolute and all power of I am. The absolute conviction, not a temporary conviction, not a temporary boost of confidence that you're in wish fulfilled, that you're feeling good, you're feeling blissful today, but not tomorrow. It's an absolute conviction of being that you are all of it. No matter what you're feeling or thinking or assuming from moment to moment. It's an absolute conviction that never goes away. It's beyond the middle, right? So those are the conditions of saying, hey, don't you know I have the power to set you free or crucify you? This is what I am says in response to Pontius Pilate. Jesus, as your I am, answered, you would have no power over me unless it had been given to you from above. For this reason, he who delivered me to you has the greater sin. Hear this. I love the way it's worded. You would or could, depending on what version of Scripture you're looking at. You would or could have no authority or no power over me. In other words, you would have no power. You could have no power unless it was given from above, from I am, from the absolute source that's untouched by any of it. Right? For this reason, he says, he who delivered me to you has the greatest sin. Your messy middle, the mind, right, has the greater sin. You are imagining things that can't be fulfilled. You imagining unwanted realities and creating those has the greater sin. The mind of temporary thoughts, the mind of temporary feelings, the assumptions, the beliefs, the doubts and fears, that has greater sin because that's what delivered you to him. But even that has no power because your I am declares it. You have no authority. You have no power. Wow. Conditions are conditions, but I am. I let go and it manifests. And in other words, he let go to the I am. Went to the assumption that it's done, it's mine, and then imagined the imaginal scene from that higher perspective. That's about, he let go to that scene and said, that is reality. I am reality. There are no other conditions yet to meet. It's sold. I'm done. I am your host, Tom Kearin, and this is the Be Something Wonderful studio of higher consciousness, where we help you level up and become the best version of yourself. Creators, thank you. Thank you for being with me. Thank you for liking and sharing and commenting on the videos. We have a Facebook group, the Be Something Wonderful Ambassadors, at facebook.com/groups/Be Something Wonderful, where you can share insight and guidance and ask for insight and guidance from others. We have a Facebook page at Be Something Wonderful, Instagram and Twitter at Tom Kearin, or just go to our website anytime for all that information and on coaching as well. I know some of you send me email or commenting, how do I reach you for coaching? Guys, it's all over there. It's in the About section on the channel. It's on my website on tomkearin.com, besomethingwonderful.com. It's in the link to the calendar is in every video. It's everywhere. And I know you do it following it because I am booked today. Solid. Thank you, creators, for being here with great love, with great light, and infinite gratitude. This is Tom Kearin with Be Something Wonderful. We'll see you soon.